guys, welcome to Rare Diamond TV, and I thank you for joining me. I want to get into this video about Tupac and Biggie today. I want you to see the lies, the cover up, and the greed of the higher ups. Read between the lines and pay attention.
Then on police department to then try and get answers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're always trying to figure out what happened. I mean, that's your goal as a homicide investigator, is to try to figure out what happened. But when people aren't cooperating, or you're not getting the information that you need in order to solve the case, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You can't force people to talk. You can't put them into a room and waterboard them. And so if people don't cooperate, it's going to be very difficult to solve a case. And when you're dealing with gangs and the gang culture, they don't cooperate for all intent and purpose. And so there's, the majority of gang crimes in Los Angeles go unsolved for that reason. These just happen to be a couple of high profile guys whose names are brought, or demand a lot of public attention, but it's just gang nonsense. And it's oftentimes the case that you don't solve gang crimes.
Do you think if Tupac and Biggie were still living longer, do you think gang violence would have got worse? Because then it's divided. It's not just divided a few gangs, like a few people in the gang. You're talking thousands and thousands. Do you think violence would have erupted more if those two were still alive?
No, I mean, obviously it got worse because they were dead. I mean, there would never have been a war between the mob Pyrus and the Southside Crips if Tupac had not been shot and killed. So their deaths actually made it worse. The gang violence, the localized gang violence between the gangs that were affiliated with those two record labels, it got worse. Now, had they survived, then who's to say what would have happened? Maybe they figure out a way to squash the beef. Maybe they figure out a way to work things out. Who knows? It's really difficult to try to speculate what would have happened if they survived.
So the Tupac murder you've solved, but how did you solve that? Was Keefe D? How does he come into play? Was he not up for getting sent for a life sentence, but you made him a deal? Is that correct?
Yeah, we made a deal with Keefe D. He confessed to his role in the murder of Tupac. He said he was in Las Vegas. He's the one that got the gun. He's the one that was in the car with his nephew. He's the one that handed the gun to his nephew, and the nephew leaned out the window and shot Tupac. So that's all pretty much cut and clear. That's the generally accepted explanation for Tupac's murder. But with Keefe D, we had made a deal with him that if he told us the truth about that we would take consideration into all the drug charges that he was facing. And so that's what happened. He made a deal and told us the story of what happened, confessed to it. But within that deal, in American law enforcement, we have what's known as a proffer agreement. And this is where a potential defendant, can agree to cooperate with the authorities under the understanding that you can't use what he's saying against him. You can use what he's saying against others. If other people provide you evidence against that person, you can use that, but you can't use his self-incriminating statements. It's part of our kind of like a Fifth Amendment type of protection. So that's the agreement. We're like, hey, Keefe D, we really want to know what happened. If you tell us what happened, whatever you tell us won't be used against you. That was how that went. But then he goes out, starts to publicly talk about his involvement. He writes a book. He does interviews. None of that information is protected and can be used against him and should be used against him. But thus far, Las Vegas just doesn't feel like they can successfully prosecute a case where the defendant is also the only witness against the same defendant, which is himself. It's very complicated.
Yeah, did he ever go to prison, Keefe D?
He's been to prison several times.
Yeah, did he go after they made the deal though, or to get his sentence cut down, or was the deal, tell us what you know and you'll not go to prison?
No, that wasn't the deal. The deal was that just cooperate us and we'll take into consideration these charges against you. Ultimately, the United States Attorney's Office never filed the drug charges against him. However, Keefe D did go to jail not, I think a couple of years after this confession, he ended up getting caught with a gun and some, I think at the time, marijuana, when marijuana was still illegal. And he did a short prison term as a result of that. But he's never went to jail for the drug charges that we brought him in on in order to gain his cooperation.
How accurate do you believe his story, Keefe D?
I believe the story he told us was 100% accurate.
And so when you think then you've solved the case, which has been going on for many years, what year was this, Greg?
So that would have been late 2008, early 2009. Yeah. And so again, what he was telling us was just the obvious. Like, it was always obvious that Orlando Anderson was the likely assailant against Tupac. So when Keefe D tells us this, it's not a big revelation. It's just like, okay, yeah, well, obviously that's the story. But now we had an eyewitness and co-conspirator actually telling us what the story was.
So now we're going to Biggie's murder case. Where was it Suge Knight who paid? Is it Poochie?
Poochie,
is that
yeah.
correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what's Suge Knight's association to Poochie? Who is Poochie? Is he a trigger man?
Yeah, Poochie was a known trigger man. He was a gang member. Used to hang out with Suge to some degree. He was a person that a lot of people understood to be a shooter. He had been involved in other shootings. He is wanted in other murders, and he definitely fit the profile of somebody who would have done this type of thing for Suge Knight. So then we get another co-conspirator who was involved in the deal to have Biggie murdered, and that was Suge Knight's girlfriend. And she tells us, listen, Suge asked me to hire Poochie to kill Biggie in retaliation for the murder of Tupac. I went and I met with Poochie. Poochie agreed to do it. There was an agreement over money, and that set everything in motion. So there's three people. You got Suge Knight, Poochie, and the girlfriend, and the three of them conspire to kill Biggie. So they wait. Everybody knew where Biggie was. He's in Los Angeles. He's showing up around town, and the information about him going to the Peterson Auto Museum the night he shot becomes common knowledge. So Poochie goes there, and whether there may have been another co-conspirator, we just don't know if Poochie was operating alone or not that night. And the next thing you know, Biggie's getting shot.
How hard is that for you, Greg, that Orlando Anderson is dead, Poochie's dead? Like, do you think you'll ever really get any closure towards Tupac and Biggie case? A conviction even?
Well, I have closure. I mean, I'm completely convinced that these two guys were responsible for the murders. And if you look at justice through an eye for an eye, then perfect justice prevailed. They were both killed in the same way that they killed Tupac and Biggie. They were both shot down in the streets. So, that's closure for me. But whether the public ever gets closure, that's a different question. There's never going to be a judicial there's never going to be a judicial reckoning where people go to court ever. It's 25 years later. Almost everybody's dead. And so they're never going to get closure if they're waiting to see somebody get convicted.
Did you ever reach out to Suge Knight and have a discussion with him or a chat? Do you think he would ever speak to you?
No, Suge Knight's not ever going to sit down and tell the truth to law enforcement.
Okay, guys, that's it for this video. If you would like to watch the whole video, you can go look this up on YouTube. Thank you so much. Like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate y'all.
They always say congratulations. Work so hard for